We're back for another Frontier Opening Bell, Tuesday, the 4th of March. Of course, you know the date on the calendar. If you're in the news already, of course, you know the biggest story, Canada, Mexico, and China's tariff tit for tat with the United States is now on the roll. It's the biggest economic story the world and the markets are facing today, the 4th of March. China hits US with 15% retaliatory tariff, an additional 10% on US agriculture imports into China. And of course, we've got a whole lot more to digest. What does it all mean for Africa as we look at the big fights on tariff by some of the world's biggest economies? So let's get this up and running. But first, let's piggyback a bit into Monday's trading day. It's the first trading day in the month of March for a number of frontier African markets, if we exclude Egypt, by the way. Egypt started positive on Sunday, continued that trajectory on Monday, which was yesterday with the rest of the region, 30,988, up by roughly 0.5%. The BRVM was green by about 0.1%. The Nairobi stock market moved 0.46%, 132.59 on the all-share index. The South African market, the biggest on the continent, up by roughly 2%, 87,564. The GSE also just reported a very impressive earnings for the full year 2024, as investors also reacted to that. On the Nigerian exchange, the index was down 0.34%, brought down largely by insurance. Consumer goods down 1.03%, the banking sector 1.2%. Zenith Bank, the biggest bank in Nigeria, down by 0.72%. Gisco was bigger, 1.55% in the red. The oil and gas, Aradale Holdings, Owando shares moderated the losses we saw on Monday. So investors are trading earnings very strongly on the Nigerian market, including those of the NGX itself. Let's just move on and out of the market, step into some of the big stories within the rest of the region. And as I just started at the opening sequence, Canada, Mexico, and China have hit the United States with the retaliatory tariffs. It's a tit for tat. We now see that very openly. China is looking, according to Bloomberg report, to file a complaint against the US at the World Trade Organization. It's all the trade war now in full blown. Let's follow that for you on a daily basis here on Frontier Africa Reports. In the meantime, Kenya Ray is looking to enter Tanzania and the Indian markets in the month of June. That's some good news. While the Revenue Authority in Kenya says it waived about 140 billion shillings in penalties and interest rate under the government tax amnesty. About 1.7 million Kenyans and accounts have been Kenyans have filed under the tax amnesty. The government says it's been able to make some chunk of money from that as well. About 140 billion shillings already forgiven. It looks like that tax amnesty is working for President Ruto's administration. In the meantime, the sale of Hilton hotels and intercontinental hotels around the central business district of Nairobi has collapsed because the bids for those two iconic hotels had failed. Let's see what happens next from here. Rwanda in the region is reopening high-value bonds in the market. The idea is to drive long-term investments into the economy. Let's move into West Africa. Of course, we have some big stories, broadly speaking, not just within West Africa. Oil prices slump on Ukraine military aid, which has been stopped by U.S. President Donald Trump. There's also the tariff tit for tat with Canada, Mexico, and China. We're seeing that taking off now. There's no deal on the table. Everyone is out with a saber rattling for tariff. And then you have OPEC talking about bringing 138,000 barrels per day output back onto the market. Those news items overnight depressed oil prices, U.S. oil around $69.29 a barrel. In the meantime, Nigeria's three largest cement makers, including one of the smaller cement maker, have reported their earnings for full year, including the Nigerian Exchange Group itself, as well as others such as United Capital, a big investment bank, reporting a net profit jump of 111% for the full year 2024. We'll unpack some of those earnings as we move on the rest of the week. Senegal saw its dollar bonds nosedive on Monday after the S&P Global Ratings cut the country's credit ratings further into junk territory. Good news, Ghana and Rwanda says they've signed an agreement, a memorandum of understanding for fintech licensing and cross-border payments, while the new governor at the Bank of Ghana, the central bank, says there will be no more payments for oil imports with gold with the companies and other agencies which had that deal earlier under the previous central bank governor. Now that has been scrapped. There's a new horizon for that. Ghana wants to keep its gold. Remember, the country's name was Gold Coast before it was changed to Ghana. Let's move on. Let's touch into Southern Africa. Not so much of a good news for South Africa with the PMI, Absa's PMI data coming in at a further contraction of 44.7, reading from 45.5 in the previous month. That is a factory sentiment that is not looking good right now. We've seen about 5 months of consecutive contraction in factory sentiment in South Africa. If you get out of that economic data, however, we saw biggest cement maker in South Africa, the PPC, posting a record earnings because of its cost-cutting strategy for last year. South Africa also has some good news. Agri exports hit a record $13.7 billion for last year, 6th straight expansion for the biggest exporter of agro products in Southern African region. Malawi's Kwanza has recovered strongly from about 5,000 to 3,000 units against the US dollar. That's at the black market because the president wants a further stronger value for the local currency. The central bank is also planning to intervene in the FX market as well. Diageo in South Africa is pushing back on plans by the government to expand or increase the excise tax or tariff in the country. It's warning that there's going to be a surge in illicit trade if the excise tax is increased further. Let's finish up in North Africa. Egypt's PMI, or what you call the factory sentiment data, came in slightly better than expected. That's good news. The World Bank is looking, however, at $100 million support for Tunisia's higher education and employability. Whole idea for what the World Bank wants to do for Tunisia under President Said is to ensure that the level of education that is being given at a higher level will enable Tunisians to become employable in the jobs market. In corporate news, Sonatrach and Saudi Aramco have cut their March LPG prices between 1% to 3%. Morocco is supplying about 65.6% of pepper to the European Union. That's a jump in the total output of what was posted for last year. And finally, in Egypt, again, Islamic banking has reached 1.14 billion Egyptian pounds. That's accounting for about 5% of the total banking services in the biggest economy north of the continent. Those are your headlines for your Frontier Opening Bell. Do have a great Tuesday, everyone. And whatever you do today, keep your eye on the tariff tit for tat. Is the biggest story with impact, and it will resonate definitely across Frontier Africa. I am Bosin Omofaye. Bye for now.